Question 2, red tape and the tax system. It's widely agreed that business prosperity generates economic outcomes in delivering jobs and dollars spent back into the economy. The rules and framework in which a business operates and develops can also be an inhibitor to growth. Business knows this as red tape. The reduction of cost to business and the complexities of running businesses are two examples of reform that can change those mechanisms of growth. As a business service provider, the chamber movement often hears firsthand of the types of costs and complexities that impede business growth, and without doubt, red tape and the tax system are two key elements that are an absolute encumbrance to business prosperity and job creation. Within both of these topics, there are rafts of different elements to consider that require reform to cut down on red tape and indeed to simplify our tax system, such as working together with the states to reduce and phase out payroll tax or having government administer superannuation and paid parental leave schemes. So we'll now call on each party to respond to the question of their commitment to deliver a reduction of red tape and a simplified tax system should they be elected. First up, Craig Thomson.
Ladies and gentlemen, there is a need for red tape. I'll start off in the negative sense, because without red tape, there is a free-for-all. So everyone, businesses, employers, workers, all understand that there is some need for red tape. The issue is, where do you draw the line and how much red tape do you need to have? I was talking to a business the other day who spoke about having to deal with 67 separate pieces of legislation in relation to their business. Now, clearly, that is too much red tape. What is the approach that governments can take in terms of this? And can I say that governments are on a no-winner on this? There are two approaches you can take. You can do a thorough review, and then people say, look, they're just spending the time reviewing these things, not changing it. Or you can make quick decisions. I'll start with quick decisions. I'm not sure there's anyone here, particularly perhaps other than Deb, who agrees that the changes to the FBT that were announced recently are a good decision. That's an example of a policy on the run. Now, from my point of view, that's a wrong policy issue. I don't see many Ferraris driving around the Central Coast on lease plans. What I see is people who are working in the charitable and aged care sector driving Hyundais on $50,000 and who haven't got pay increases, but have instead their employer has offered them the benefit of the FBT discount. So that is one of the traps of jumping in. Now let's look at the other approaches that are there. You can have the long review. The Labor government did the Henry tax review. The criticism of that, quite rightly, was it took a long time. It then took over 12 months for the government to decide what they were going to do with the Henry review when they got it. And then, and this is where I think there are the real problems in terms of taxation, governments, because of the nature of democracy, pick and choose. So rather than look at the comprehensive changes to the tax system and say we need to be changing it in a whole range of ways to make this better for businesses, employers and the lot, they pick out a couple of special ones that they like and hope that they're politically popular. In the case of the Labor government, it was the rent and resources tax in particular that was the change that was there. But there was also the change in terms of a promise to reduce company tax. We've later, of course, found that that promise hasn't been able to be met. The Coalition, on the other hand, have said, going into this election, that they're going to review all the taxes. And you go, well, that sounds like a reasonable thing to do, including GST and so forth. But we're now finding that they're going to do a review of all the taxes, but not all the taxes may necessarily be changed under the review. Now, I'm a little bit confused as to what that actually means. What I think is the best approach in relation to tax, and in particular, is that you do the work in terms of the reviews that are there, but you don't pick and choose. You have the debate publicly and you look at the changes. The Howard government brought in the GST. John Hewson lost an election because of the GST. No one particularly worries about that now, and that dramatically changed our tax base and the way in which it operates. Big changes are possible if parties are able to show some courage in relation to what they do, and courage certainly isn't walking away from reviews that you do. So both parties need to make sure that if they're going to do a review, that they're going to consult and they stick to what the outcome actually is. In terms of red tape with businesses, we clearly have too much that is being placed back on businesses. Gone are the times when government departments assisted business in terms of doing the work that's necessary in relation to regulation. What governments have done is shifted that emphasis completely around the other way. It's now governments don't do the work. You give the work to the business to fill out all their compliance issues, work that was once done by governments. That needs to change. We need to be in a position that a small business in particular is able to have a one-stop shop with government, and it's government that sorts out where their obligations are, what needs to be done so that it can work effectively. This outsourcing and pushing of things back onto business is not good for business, it's not good for employment, it ties businesses and people up, and it's something that we need to change the emphasis of. They're the two major things that I think we need to do. Make sure that we do thorough taxation review, looking at state, federal issues, but carry it through, not cherry pick. And secondly, in terms of red tape, make sure that there is a genuine one-stop shop, that we don't put things back on business to do. We take back that public service responsibility and make sure we're alleviating the burden on business rather than adding to it.
Thanks, Craig. So we'll swap it around now and keep it going in order. So up next to talk on what a returned Labor government will do in regards to reducing red tape and simplifying our tax system. Back to Deb.
Thanks, Troy. And I guess this is a vexed issue. As Craig has made the point, regulation is part of making sure that there is a level playing field across the country in part, but red tape has all those negative terms, negative connotations hanging off it. And we're talking, I guess, about regulation that gets in the way of getting on with the job. And as you noted in your brief for this event, the rules and the framework in which business operates and develops can be an inhibitor for growth, or I would make the case that it could potentially be an enabler of growth. And the commitment to reducing red tape for small business and improving productivity is something that I absolutely am passionate about. Coming from a small business family myself, growing up in a family business where there were many employees over the years, I understand what it means to come home and have to continue your work in the dark, in the night time, just to get a business off the ground. But red tape is a part of that journey. I know it's putting in some sort of disincentive for some businesses to get off the ground, but claims that small business are negatively impacted by every single one of 22,000 new regulations introduced since 2007 are misleading, and I want to put some facts on the record. For an example, 3,400 of those 22,000 that are so often cited were actually airworthiness directives issued to maintain and enhance public air safety. Countless others actually relate to non-business functions of government, such as family law, military law, justice and homelessness. So regulation is not all bad. It can confer real benefits, although it never seems like that. For example, the 4,200 legislative instruments which can actually see Australian businesses benefit from tax breaks through tariff concession orders. The government has in fact repealed over 4,000 regulations since April, and it was in the process of slashing 12,000 from the statute book. And this is a natural part of, as business changes, the government has to change to reflect that. We've also put in place systems to identify and limit the implementation of burdensome regulation. For example, the regulatory impact analysis, which promotes a minimum of effective regulation as the best way to address compliance costs. We're always on the lookout to see what we can do to remove unforeseen and unintended regulatory burdens. But there's one burden that we can't get rid of, and it's the bane of life of every micro and small business on the coast. That's the GST. GST collection, BAS statements, is a fact of business life, a significant deterrent to many people who dream of starting a business, that can be the thing that prevents them from engaging. It also takes a lot of time for administration. Now, I don't know about you, but I find the paperwork around workers' compensation, it is a state issue, the most cumbersome reporting structure that I ever have to interact with. I've never seen anything quite as bad as it. But there are points that we can make a change to. Because we're so elegantly poised on the edge of the national highway, we're a great region for logistic companies in the transport sector to site themselves and grow their businesses. We're helping the nation's $61 billion transport industry by massively cutting red tape. In July, we achieved the replacement of 23 separate state, territory and federal regulators, which up to now had regulated heavy vehicles, so rail safety and maritime safety, with a more streamlined group of 3 national regulators. And the relief for the transport industry and the increase in productivity that it offers is really very significant. Many small businesses improved with this change. With removal of a very costly and confusing array of regulations of the movement of interstate trade, this type of decrease of red tape and outdated regulation is estimated to boost the national income by $30 billion over the next 20 years. Recently, we cut the red tape burden for Australia's restaurant and cafe owners by amending the Australian Consumer Law to remove the need for separate menus on weekends and public days. Small business concerns regarding regulation that required small business operators and news agents and service stations to rotate graphic health warnings were raised with the Minister, and in what could be called policy on the run by some, meetings with government actually was a response to business. And we made it clear that it was obviously an incredible burden on these businesses, and we made changes. So that amendment recently finished public consultation and the unintended regulatory burden was removed. The thing I know about small businesses, while there might be a common concern about red tape that we all share, every small business and every sector within that small business gathering has very particular different needs, very different burdens. And so the complex conversations that we have to have about how we respond to challenges that arise are ones that I'm happy to take part in. As an advocate for business on the Central Coast, I understand, I passionately believe in small business. It's the generator of our local economy. Without it, we don't create the jobs that employ the kids that I've taught over 25 years. So very importantly, tax changes, improvements for local businesses and removal of regulatory burden wherever possible is the platform I'd like to advance.
Okay, finally, she's had to wait a little while, very patiently. Would you please welcome Karen McNamara, the Liberal candidate for Dobell, to talk about red tape and the tax system and what a Liberal coalition government will do.
In electorates such as Dobell and Robertson, small business operators are the engine room of our economy and deserve far more support and recognition from government than they currently get. The Coalition has a strong track record in supporting business. We understand that you can't have a strong and healthy society without a strong economy to sustain it, and you don't have a strong economy without profitable business. And that's why the Coalition will support business by removing unnecessary regulation and easing the cost of compliance to enable productivity and innovation, which in turn generates employment opportunities. When I talk with businesses, business operators are telling me the cost of compliance is a major barrier to productivity and growth. I know from my first-hand experience from my previous role as a compliance manager, the impact compliance and regulation has upon the daily operations and the bottom line. Now, no one disputes that business regulation is essential for ensuring the protection of employers, employees and the general public. But business regulation that is inefficient or unnecessary imposes undue costs on business. Red and green tape is growing and it's choking the life out of local businesses. The average Australian business deals with 8 regulators in a given year and spends up to 4% of their total annual expenditure on compliance. Approximately 19 hours a week is spent on compliance activities. The Coalition is committed to building a stronger, more productive and diverse economy. And to this end, the Coalition has established the Deregulation Task Force, chaired by Senator Arthur Sinodinos, and has released its comprehensive policy to boost productivity and reduce regulation. The Coalition's policy contains a clear plan of action to meet a regulation reduction of at least $1 billion a year by reforming the process by which new regulations are created, implemented and reviewed, and repealing or amending costly and excessive existing regulations. Now, some of the key features of the Coalition's policy include linking the remuneration of senior public servants to proven reductions in regulation, setting aside at least 2 parliamentary sitting days each year for the purpose of repealing unnecessary or redundant legislation with specific focus on reducing the regulatory burden on small business. For example, providing small business with the option of remitting compulsory superannuation payments made on behalf of workers directly to the ATO, and the tabling of red tape reduction report in Parliament on an annual basis. Now, some examples of legislation which the Coalition is committed to removing or simplifying include repealing Labor's carbon tax, lifting a $9 billion a year tax burden for Australian businesses and households, repealing the minerals resource rent tax, amending Labor's government's Future of Financial Advice package to reduce compliance costs for small business financial advisors. And under the Coalition's paid parental leave scheme, small businesses will not have to administer the cost of the scheme. The Coalition recognises that access to finance for small business is often difficult and expensive. 2/3 of small business lending is secured against the family home. With this in mind, we will work with regulatory authorities and lenders to ensure that the commitment of personal guarantees and private asset mortgage is rewarded by more affordable and improved access to small business finance. We will also encourage government departments to introduce policies and procedures that won't disadvantage small business when tendering for government contracts. The Coalition recognises the financial pressures on small business, and we will ensure that all government departments and agencies meet their obligations to small business with a pay on time or pay interest approach. In further recognition of the burden on business, Joe Hockey has committed an Abbott-led government, if elected, will commission a white paper on tax reform within its first term. This will, of course, look at the issues raised in the Henry Tax Review. And in this vein, we recognise the importance that small business should not be burdened by government departments such as the ATO. The Coalition will foster a more cooperative approach between taxpayers and the ATO. And as Joe Hockey has stated, we all have to pay our fair share of tax, but the relationship with the ATO does not have to be adversarial and should be based on mutual respect. And it's obvious that the Coalition is committed to reducing the regulatory burden on business. It is the Coalition that has released a comprehensive policy to boost productivity and reduce regulation, and has established the Deregulation Task Force. And it's both Lucy and I that are here today because we are committed to supporting the Central Coast business community.